So today we're going to dive into one of the world's oldest and really most influential philosophies, Buddhism. For thousands of years, it's offered a path away from suffering for millions of people. But how does it actually work? Well, let's get into it. At its core, Buddhism tackles this huge question we've all probably asked ourselves at some point. Why do we feel stress and pain and just dissatisfaction in our lives? Is this just how things are, or is there maybe a way to find some real, lasting peace? And this whole search for an answer, it starts not with some philosopher in an ivory tower, but with a prince. A prince who literally gave up a life of total luxury because he had a hunch that something was deeply wrong with the world he'd been hidden away from. He just had to find out what it was. And that prince, his name was Siddhartha Gautama. His incredible journey from a sheltered royal to an enlightened teacher is really the foundation of everything we're about to explore. This timeline really maps out a radical transformation. So Siddhartha was born a prince in Lumbini, and his father basically kept him locked away in a palace, completely shielded from any kind of real-world pain. But one day he gets out, and for the very first time, he sees an old man, a sick man, and a dead body. And it just shatters his whole reality. So he leaves everything behind, the palace, the wealth, everything, to find an end to this suffering. After years of searching and meditating, he finally achieves enlightenment under the Bodhi tree and becomes the Buddha, which just means the enlightened one. For the rest of his life, he taught what he had discovered, the Dharma, before passing away at the age of 80. So what was this amazing truth that he discovered? Well, it's laid out in something called the Four Noble Truths. And a great way to think about it is like a doctor's visit for the human condition. First, you identify the illness, then its cause, then you see if there's a cure, and finally, you get the prescription. All right, so let's walk through this diagnosis. First up, dukkha, the illness. The truth is, suffering is just a built-in part of life. And we're not just talking about big tragedies, but that constant, low-level feeling that things aren't quite right. Second, samudaya, the cause. So what's causing all this? It's our constant craving, our attachment to things and outcomes. Third, nirodha, the prognosis. And this is the good news. There is a way to end the suffering. It is possible. And finally, magga, the prescription. The way to do it, the path to get there, is called the Eightfold Path. And the Buddha had a very specific name for this craving, tanha. This is the engine that drives our dissatisfaction. It's that relentless thirst for more, that need for things to be different than they are, that desire for permanence in a world that is always, always changing. This, he said, is the real root of all our problems. Okay, so if tanha is the problem, what's the solution? That brings us to the prescription, right? The practical, step-by-step guide for how we can actually change our lives. And this is it, the Eightfold Path. Now, this isn't a list of commandments you have to obey. It's more like a set of practices that all work together to retrain your mind and your habits. Take right speech, for example. It's not just don't lie. It's so much deeper. It's about actively avoiding gossip or harsh words or any kind of talk that causes conflict. You can see it's a whole life approach, covering everything from how you think to how you make a living. Now, to make this whole thing a bit easier to get your head around, the path is often broken down into three main categories, or pillars. So, right view and intention, that's all about developing wisdom. Right speech, action, and livelihood, those focus on ethical conduct. And finally, right effort, mindfulness, and concentration. They build the pillar of mental discipline, or what we might call meditation. And what's the end game here? What's the ultimate goal of following this path? It's nirvana. Now, it's super important to understand that nirvana is not a heaven or some physical place you go to. It's a state of being. It's what happens when you extinguish those flames of greed, hatred, and delusion, the very flames of tanha. It means you're finally free from that endless cycle of suffering. So we've got the diagnosis and we've got the prescription. But what does this look like in the real world? How do these ideas actually translate into the daily life of a Buddhist? Let's take a look at some of the core beliefs and practices. Okay, two huge concepts shape this entire practice: karma and rebirth. Karma is basically the law of cause and effect. Think of it this way. Every single action you take, good or bad, plants a seed. Good actions plant seeds for future happiness, bad actions for future suffering. And this whole process is what drives samsara, that continuous cycle of life, death, and rebirth.
Put simply, what you do in this life directly shapes what your next one will be like, over and over until you finally break the cycle by reaching nirvana.
And for everyday followers, this ethical life is guided by the 5 precepts. Now, these aren't divine commands, they're more like personal promises you make to yourself to live with more mindfulness and compassion. They're just really practical guidelines to help you avoid causing harm, both to yourself and to others. And holding all of this together is a core practice called taking refuge in the 3 jewels. Basically, this means placing your trust in the Buddha as the ultimate teacher, in the Dharma as the true path, and in the Sangha, the community of other practitioners, for support and guidance along the way.
But here's the thing. Buddhism didn't just stay as one single, rigid tradition. As it spread out from India, it did what all great ideas do. It adapted. It blended with new cultures and evolved into different schools of thought. So the 3 main branches have their own unique flavors. First, you've got Theravada. It's the oldest school, and its focus is on individual liberation. You'll find it mostly in Southeast Asia. Then there's Mahayana, which is common across East Asia. It introduced this incredible ideal of the bodhisattva. That's someone who gets to the brink of nirvana but chooses to stay behind to help everyone else get there first. And finally, we have Vajrayana, which you'll see in places like Tibet. It uses some pretty advanced techniques and rituals to try and speed up the path to enlighten. You can just imagine these ideas traveling along the ancient Silk Road, carried by monks and merchants, spreading far and wide. This philosophy touched everything from art to culture all across Asia. And in the last century or so, it's had a huge impact on the Western world, too.
So, when you boil it all down, despite all the different traditions and practices, Buddhism at its heart remains this profound guide for millions of people, a path to finding peace, wisdom, and ultimately a deeper understanding of ourselves. And that leaves us with a really powerful question to think about. This whole path that we've just explored, it suggests that maybe, just maybe, freedom isn't found by trying to fix everything outside of us, but by transforming the one thing we actually have control over, our own mind. Thanks for joining us.